I'm Siraj Khan, lecturer in English Cust. Welcome to my subject, Shakespearean Studies. Our course code is English 4262 and it's our lecture number 13. Today we are talking about Shakespearean tragedy. Tragedy is a very difficult concept to define. In spite of all that modern critics have said on this subject, Aristotle's definition of tragedy in his book, The Poetic, still remains the best. According to Aristotle, tragedy is a representation of an action which is serious, complete in itself, and of a certain magnitude. It is expressed in speech, made beautiful in different ways in different parts of the play. It is acted, not narrated, and by exciting pity and fear gives a healthy relief to such emotions. Although Shakespeare did not have a conscious conception about tragedy, still from his tragedies and serious plays we can get together a notion of what constitutes Shakespearean tragedy. For example, one can easily agree with Dowden that Shakespeare conceives tragedy as concerned with the ruin or restoration of the life of a man and of his soul. In many cases, it shows the struggle between good and evil. Similarly, like another critic appropriately refers to Shakespearean tragedy as the apotheosis, exalting to goodhood of the soul of man. By far, the most perceptive comments about Shakespearean tragedy are those of Bradley, who defines the essence of Shakespearean tragedy as a tale of suffering and calamity conducting to death. Although this remark captures what is common to Shakespearean tragedies, it may be that there are very few observations which one may make about one of them which are also applicable to the others. Now, the outlines of today's lecture are: what is tragedy? Shakespearean tragedy, the concept of tragic hero, and the key elements of a tragedy. Tragedy, the word tragedy was derived from the Greek word tragödia, which means the song of the goat. It is called the song of the goat because in ancient Greece, the theater performers used to wear goatskin costumes to represent satires. Today, in theater and literature, a tragedy is a work that has an unhappy ending. The ending must include the main character's downfall. And according to Aristotle, tragedy is a representation of an action which is serious in nature, complete in itself, and of a certain magnitude. It is expressed in speech, made beautiful in different ways in different parts of the play. It is acted, not narrated, and by exciting pity and fear gives a healthy relief to such emotions. That is the definition given by Aristotle in his book, The Poetics. Shakespearean tragedy. A Shakespearean tragedy is a play penned by Shakespeare himself, or a play written in the style of Shakespeare by a different author. Shakespearean tragedy has got its own specific features which distinguish it from other kinds of tragedies. It must be kept in mind that Shakespeare is mostly indebted to Aristotle's theory of tragedy in his works. The elements of Shakespearean tragedy are discussed below. Shakespeare's tragedies: Titus Andronicus, Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Othello, Timon of Athens, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, Troilus and Cressida. Now, the elements are the first of all the tragic hero. A tragic hero, like Shakespeare's tragedies, are definitely built around a single personality who towers above the other characters. In plays like Antony and Cleopatra and Macbeth, the central character, for the most part, may be regarded as a double entity. Shakespeare's tragic heroes have many qualities in common. One of them is their intense concern for someone, thing, or aspect of life. Although, it is doubtful whether Shakespeare knew the Poetics, his heroes, with the possible exception of Macbeth, are all essentially good. Even if Macbeth has an intensely poetic nature and is quite honest in weaving his own enormities, Shakespeare's tragic heroes are of an extremely sensitive and poetic temperament. Hamlet being the most intellectual and Othello the most poetic of them. Like the examples of Hamlet and Othello, if we take, they also belong to the highest rung of society, the lowest in rank being Othello, who is at least a general whose descent may be traced to kings. In every one of the tragedies, the hero is faced either with making a moral choice of grave consequence or initiating some action which has far-reaching consequences. But a tragic hero is one of the most significant elements of his tragedies. The type of tragedy is essentially a one-man show. Shakespearean tragedy, especially, is a one-man show. It is a story about one or sometimes two characters. It revolves around the protagonist and antagonist. The hero may be either male or female, and he or she must suffer because of some flaw of character, because of inevitable fate, or both. The hero must be the most tragic personality in the play, according to Andrew Cecil Bradley, a noted 20th century Shakespeare scholar. A Shakespearean tragedy is essentially a tale of suffering and calamity conducting to death. He defines a Shakespearean tragedy. Usually the hero has to face death in the end. Good versus evil. Shakespearean tragedies play out the struggle between good and evil. Most of them deal with the supremacy of evil and suppression of good. According to Edward Dowden, a 19th century noted poet and literary critic, tragedy as conceived by Shakespeare is concerned with the ruin or restoration of the soul and of the life of man, as I said earlier. In other words, its subject is the struggle of good and evil in the world. Evil is presented in Shakespearean tragedies in a way that suggests its existence is an indispensable and ever-endeavoring thing. For example, in Hamlet, the reader is given the impression that something rotten will definitely happen to Denmark, like foreshadowing, though the reader gets an inkling. Typically, the common people of the play are unaware of the impending evil. So it's clash between good and evil. Tragic flaw or hamasha is a Greek word for sin or error, which derives from the verb hamatein, meaning to err or to miss the mark. A Shakespearean tragedy is above all a tragedy of character, though the environment, chance, and coincidence also play their own part. Some tragedies, notably Macbeth, include the supernatural also. Still above all is some trait in the character of tragic hero, which flaw it is not necessarily always a shortcoming in itself. Every hero falls due to some flaw in his or her character. Here I will once again reference A.C. Bradley, who asserts the calamities and catastrophe follow inevitably from the deeds of men, and the main source of these deeds is character. Like as a result of the fatal flaw, the hero falls from a high position, which usually leads to his her unavoidable death. Like for example, Hamlet's habits of carefully weighing the pros and cons of everything before taking action would have proved an asset to Othello, while Othello's precipitateness of action would have cut short Hamlet's agonies. Thus, a character in a particular situation, which is the causative force behind Shakespearean tragedies, though in a general way, it is quite correct to refer to them as tragedies of character. It may be noted that the suffering of the hero is often quite out of proportion to the fault or faulty choice of which he is guilty, but it is an admitted fact that in tragedy, crime and punishment are never commensurates. Tragic waste. In Shakespearean tragedies, the hero usually dies along with his opponent. The death of a hero is not an ordinary death. It encompasses the loss of an exceptionally intellectual, honest, intelligent, noble, and virtuous person. In a tragedy, when good is destroyed along with evil, the loss is known as a tragic waste. Shakespearean tragedy always includes a tragic waste of goodness. Hamlet is a perfect example of tragic waste. Even like though Hamlet succeeds in uprooting the evil from Denmark, he does so that at the cost of his death. In this case, the good Hamlet gets destroyed along with evil Claudius. Neither of them wins. Instead, they fail together. Conflict is another imperative element of Shakespearean tragedy. There are two types of conflicts: is external conflicts and internal conflicts in the characters from society, or internal from the characterization. Is the tragic hero is the center of the dramatist's attention. At least one other character near him is also brought into the limelight. In some tragedies, there are several other characters who have an important function in the story and whose characterization, therefore, receives appropriate attention. Catharsis is a remarkable feature. Catharsis is a remarkable feature of Shakespearean tragedy. It refers to the cleansing of the audience's pent-up emotions. In other words, Shakespearean tragedies help the audience to feel and release emotions through the aid of tragedy. When we watch a tragedy, we identify with the characters and take their loosest personality. A Shakespearean tragedy gives us an opportunity to feel pity for a certain character and fear for another, almost as if we are playing the roles ourselves. The hero's deeds cause us to feel wrath toward him. Tears flow freely when a hero like Hamlet dies. At the same time, we feel both sorry for Hamlet and happy that Claudius has received his proper punishment. Even without knowing the Poetics, Shakespeare manages to excite strong pity and terror in his tragedies. However, these are not the only emotions which they excite. In the opinion of Bradley, the characteristic emotion aroused by Shakespearean tragedies is a profound sense of waste. This is derived from the idea of human worth and dignity, which the plays express, and the missed opportunities are wrong choices which lead to man's defeat without affecting his essential dignity. Shakespearean tragedies embody a sense of profound suffering and sadness, and some of them end in a number of deaths. The most conspicuous in the respect being Hamlet in King Lear, where the stage is literally littered with dead bodies in the last scene. All the same, they do not leave a depressing effect on the mind. There is something towards the close which restores our faith in man's greatness and God's wise providence. The atmosphere, in fact, is one of calm serenity, very well expressed by Milton in the closing lines of Samson Agonist. We are given the impression that the suffering has not gone west. It has either enabled the protagonist, other characters, or the audience to attain new insight, or the work towards, has worked towards a better future. Many Shakespearean tragedies characteristically end on a note of hope. Supernatural elements. Chance and fate. The latter, sometimes in the form of the supernatural, also play their part in Shakespearean tragedies. However, they are never the starting point of the tragedies and are rather admitted into them when the story has already taken a definite course. The incident of the handkerchief in Othello is an example of pure chance, which is exploited by the villain. But this chance takes place at a time when the seeds of jealousy have already attained a flourishing growth in Othello's mind. It is not the cause of Othello's jealousy. Similarly, even in Macbeth, we get the impression that the three witches only give an outward shape to a vaulting ambition that is already there in Macbeth's mind. So, the elements are another key aspect of Shakespearean tragedy. They play an important role in creating an atmosphere of awe, wonder, and sometimes fear. Supernatural elements are typically used to advance the story and drive the plot. The ghost Hamlet sees plays an important role in stirring up internal conflict. It is the ghost who tells Hamlet his father was killed by his uncle Claudius and assigns him the duty of taking revenge. Similarly, the witches in Macbeth play a significant role in the plot. These witches are responsible for motivating Macbeth to resort to murder in order to ascend the throne of Scotland. The three witches in Macbeth. Absence of poetic justice. Poetic justice means good is rewarded and evil is punished. It refers to a situation in which everything comes to a fitting and just end. There is no poetic justice in the tragedies of Shakespeare. Rather, these plays contain only partial justice. Like Shakespeare understood that poetic justice rarely occurs outside of fiction. Good deeds often go without reward, and immoral people are often free to enjoy life to its fullest. Do good and have good was considered an outdated ethos in the time of Shakespeare, which is why we don't find any poetic justice in his tragedies. Good is crushed along with evil. Hamlet dies along with Claudius. Comic relief. Comic relief is our final key element. Shakespeare didn't follow in the footsteps of his classical predecessors when writing in the footsteps of his classical predecessors when writing tragedies. Greek and Roman writers didn't use comic relief, but Shakespeare wanted to relieve the tension for the reader and lighten up the mood here and there. A few examples of comic relief scenes include the grave digger scene in Hamlet, the drunken poet scene in Macbeth, the fool in King Lear, etc. That's all about his key elements of a tragedy. There are other passions versus reason, the role of chance and fate, theme and action, like have well-defined major theme which is often capable of being expressed in moral terms, as in King Lear, Othello, and others. The characterization, tragic effect, and many more. Thank you very much, and good luck.